The atmosphere was getting tense. Jinwoo and Thomas Andre began to release their respective auras. The air around them vibrated from the immense pressure of the two great powers that were about to clash. Thomas stared at Jinwoo and said, "You know who I am." Jinwoo returned his gaze without flinching. In a cold tone he replied, "Don't be stupid. I don't care who you are." Inwardly, Thomas felt a little surprised. He didn't expect someone to dare speak to him like that. With a wide smile filled with confidence, Thomas said, "Okay, blame your own arrogance, you damn bastard." And immediately, Thomas threw his first punch. Thomas began to launch his attack towards Jinwoo. Boom! A huge explosion was heard, marking the beginning of a fierce battle between the two strongest hunters. Outside the building, the pro hunter members had gathered at the location, preparing for any eventuality. However, they were not the only ones. All the hunters from the scavenger guild were also on standby, waiting for orders from their leader. As the atmosphere became increasingly tense, suddenly, boom! A loud bang shook the area. Smoke billowed high into the sky, and all eyes were on the source of the explosion. Unexpectedly, it was Thomas Andre himself, who was thrown away by Sun Jinwoo's counterattack. His men immediately ran over with worried faces. "Master, are you okay?" one of them asked. However, Thomas only grinned as he brushed the dust off his body. "Don't come any closer. I'm not done here yet," he shouted angrily. On the other hand, Jinwoo knew that Jinho could not be left in this dangerous place any longer. Quickly, he called Kaisel and Agris. "Take Jinho to the hospital now," he ordered. Without waiting long, Kaisel soared into the sky, carrying Agris and Jinho away from the battlefield. Now there was no one to distract him. The big battle was truly about to begin. Thomas stood at the forefront, his aura of power surging violently, leading the entire scavenger army ready to charge. Meanwhile, Jinwoo did not remain silent. He raised his hand, and from within his shadow, one by one the dark warriors rose, an army so terrifying that it made the hunters there hold their breath. Thomas looked at the scene and smiled. "Huh? At least you're worth facing." His voice sounded relaxed, but behind it was anger that was ready to explode. "Now my pride is at stake. The only way to restore it is to destroy this arrogant person." He then looked at Jinwoo and said, "There's still time to admit your mistake. If you apologize now, maybe I'll consider sparing your life." However, Jinwoo only stared at him coldly. Without saying a word, he raised his hand and showed his middle finger. Thomas's eyes widened. Then his face turned red with overflowing anger. "You bastard! How dare you challenge me like this? You will regret it." His aura of power was now burning even more, so strong that his body began to be enveloped in a hot light that burned his clothes. The hunters from the scavenger guild were already in fighting positions, ready to face the shadow army led by Iron. And finally, Jinwoo and Thomas stared at each other sharply. In a tense silence, they gave their orders to their respective troops. "Move!" In an instant, the two armies moved simultaneously, charging at each other with full force. On the scavenger side, the tankers immediately raised their shields, creating a magic barrier to withstand the onslaught of attacks. However, Jinwoo's shadow army showed no signs of fear. With aggressive and unhesitating movements, they charged into the enemy's defenses. In the midst of the chaos, Thomas Andre advanced to the front lines, brutally breaking through the shadow army. With his incredible physical strength, he tore through the enemy's formation like a raging storm. No one could stop him, or at least that's what he thought. Suddenly, Tusk stood in front of him, raising his magic staff and creating a powerful barrier to block Thomas's advance. However, Thomas only grinned. With one swift step, he took a running start and shot away like a bullet. Boom! With incredible speed and destructive power, he slammed into Tusk's defenses directly. In one powerful attack, Tusk's head was instantly crushed. "This summon is pretty strong," Thomas muttered, watching the remains of Tusk disappear into the shadows. "My guild members probably won't be able to handle them." After finishing off Tusk, Thomas landed lightly, watching his guild members begin to struggle against Jinwoo's shadow army. And there, standing tall in the middle of the battle, was Jinwoo himself, glaring at him with no fear whatsoever. Thomas didn't hesitate. He immediately charged towards Jinwoo, but before he could reach his target, Iron suddenly jumped in front of him with his shield and axe. "Move aside, you piece of trash," Thomas shouted before slamming his deadly blow into Iron's body. Crack! With a single blow, Iron was shattered into pieces. However, something unexpected happened. In a flash, it disappeared from Thomas's sight. In a split second, he suddenly appeared beside him, swinging his sword at Thomas's stomach in a deadly combination attack. Slash! Boom! But the sword didn't even scratch Thomas's skin. In one swift motion, but before the attack could hit its target, Jinwoo darted forward to stop it. Unfortunately, Thomas was faster. With one powerful punch, he slammed into Jinwoo hard, sending him flying through the air like a ragdoll. Not stopping there, Thomas immediately activated psychokinesis, pulling Jinwoo's body back toward him with an invisible force. "You underestimate a national-level hunter," he said with a grin. "Feel the difference in power between us and surrender." However, Jinwoo only smiled faintly. Without a word, he activated Monarch's authority, creating an incredibly strong gravitational pressure on Thomas. Thomas's body suddenly felt heavy. He tried to move, but he couldn't. Cold sweat poured down his forehead. "What the hell? Why can't I move?" He tried to pull Jinwoo toward him, but instead, Jinwoo used the momentum to speed up. With the force of Thomas's own pull, Jinwoo landed a hard punch right into his face. Bang! Blood spurted from Thomas's mouth. His body was thrown back. "Shit, I'm bleeding." But before he could get back up, Jinwoo was right in front of him, ready to unleash another attack. "What did you say?" Jinwoo asked, his voice cold. "Feel the difference in power between us and surrender." And in an instant, Jinwoo began raining blows on Thomas from every direction. Boom, bam, crack. Cornered and filled with rage, Thomas finally said, "All right, I won't underestimate you anymore." At that moment, he activated reinforcement. In an instant, his body began to change. A layer of golden armor covered his body, giving off an aura of incredible power. Jinwoo, who saw the change, immediately took a step back as he remembered something. "I remember what Kamish said. There are 4 humans who have borrowed the power of the rulers. They are national-level hunters who managed to defeat the dragon, and one of them is Thomas Andre." With his new form, Thomas stood tall and challenged Jinwoo. However, instead of being afraid, Jinwoo immediately rushed towards him with a swift attack. Seeing that, Thomas immediately slammed both his hands on the ground. Capture? In an instant, the ground beneath them cracked and exploded, creating a powerful wave of energy that destroyed everything around it. However, Jinwoo swiftly jumped high into the air to avoid it. But Thomas didn't stop there. With a swift movement, he activated the same skill once again. Capture? From his hand, a pitch-black ball formed, a terrifying power capable of pulling at everything around it. Scavenger Guild members who saw it immediately retreated as far as possible, aware of the danger that was about to occur. However, Jinwoo's shadow troops remained still, as if unaffected by the power. And something surprising happened. One by one, Jinwoo's shadow soldiers began to be sucked into the black ball. The suction power was so strong, as if creating a small black hole that could devour everything. Jinwoo, who was now holding on to the building's pillar, activated Monarch's authority to keep himself from being sucked in. In his heart, he muttered, "This power is amazing. It can pull in everything like a black hole. If it weren't for Monarch's authority, I would have been sucked in too." Thomas stared at Jinwoo sharply, and boom! A huge explosion occurred. The shockwave was so powerful, it destroyed all of Jinwoo's shadow troops in one attack. However, Jinwoo managed to dodge in time, and was now standing on top of a building, looking down at Thomas with an unfazed expression. Thomas grinned. "You were lucky to escape, but next time, I won't miss." Meanwhile, the hunters watching the fight began to move away. "Take all the injured, keep them away from Master," shouted one of the scavenger members. However, the fight was far from over. Thomas, who had now begun to increase his aura, took a running start and immediately shot towards Jinwoo at incredible speed. However, with a casual movement, Jinwoo greeted him with a hard kick to his head. Bang! A loud collision occurred, sending them both flying in opposite directions. Not wanting to lose momentum, Thomas activated Capture, again to pull Jinwoo towards him. However, Jinwoo instead retaliated with Monarch's authority, pulling Thomas back towards him. Now the two of them were pulling each other, making their collision speed increase drastically. Thomas was briefly surprised. Did he pull me on purpose so that we would collide faster? Does he really want to fight me head on? Huh? Alright, I'll take him on. Reinforcement. With full force, Thomas strengthened his arm and prepared his deadly blow. Boom! Jinwoo and Thomas's punches finally collided. The impact of their collision created a shockwave so large that the buildings around them shook. But that's when Thomas's eyes widened. He realized something. The golden armor on his hand began to crack, and crack. The armor shattered into pieces. Instantly, Thomas's body was thrown far back, hitting the ground hard. His screams echoed throughout the battle arena. Jinwoo did not waste the opportunity. As soon as he landed, without hesitation, he immediately shot back to launch another attack. Thomas, who was still staggering, quickly swung a punch at Jinwoo. However, with incredible reflexes, Jinwoo easily dodged the punch, and in one swift movement, Jinwoo grabbed Thomas by the horns and pulled his head down, before hitting him with a devastating lotus punch. Thomas's armor cracked again, From a distance, the Bureau hunter members could only stare with wide eyes. They all knew this was no longer a fight between two ordinary humans. This was beyond reason. How could two people create such a huge amount of magical pressure? It felt like the air around them was shaking from the power they were releasing. This was no joke. We had to get away before we got caught up in this crazy fight. And just then, a massive explosion rocked the battle area once again. From a distance, Adam stared with wide eyes, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. That's Thomas Andre, right? What the heck is going on over there? The situation was getting more chaotic. Several other hunters around him began to panic. What should we do now? Should we get closer? One of them said in a trembling voice, but all they could do was watch from afar, because what was happening in front of them was no ordinary fight. It was a one-sided massacre. Amidst the rubble, Thomas Andre's massive body lay, battered. The strongest tank, the national-level hunter who had always stood at the top, had been knocked down, and the one who did it was Sung Jinwoo. His eyes were sharp as a sword, still with unwavering determination. With incredible speed, Jinwoo continued to pound Thomas, without giving him a single chance to breathe. Punch after punch landed mercilessly, destroying all defenses Thomas had. In his heart, Thomas still couldn't accept this. It can't be that a mage-type hunter has this kind of physical strength. His hands moved to counterattack, his claws darting towards Jinwoo. However, with a light movement, Jinwoo simply brushed them aside, when in return, a hard punch hit Thomas's face, making him stagger. Frustration began to cloud his mind. No, I can't lose. I am Thomas Andre. I am power itself. Filled with anger, he tried to stand up, staring at Jinwoo with a look of pride that was starting to crumble. Do you think this is enough to take me down? However, Jinwoo had only one answer. His elbow rose, and in a matter of seconds, a powerful blow hit Thomas's head, sending him crashing back to the ground. I told you, I don't care who you are, Jinwoo said, his voice cold, without giving any room. Then Woo rained down more attacks on Thomas. Each blow felt like a sledgehammer, piercing Thomas's golden armor that was now starting to crack. From a distance, Adam shouted, "Hunter Sung, stop, that's enough." But Jinwoo didn't budge. To him, the fight wasn't over yet. He kept hitting until Thomas's armor shattered into pieces, revealing his body covered in cuts and bruises. In the end, there was nothing more Thomas could do. His bloodied hand lifted slightly. In a weak and desperate voice, he finally said, "It's enough. I surrender." And as soon as those words came out, Jinwoo stopped his blows. Silence fell over the arena. All eyes were on the figure who had been known as the American Monster, now lying helpless, defeated by someone who wasn't even on the National Hunter list. Fear enveloped the witnesses. They gulped, feeling cold sweat running down their backs. How is this possible? How could Thomas Andre, the world's strongest hunter, be made like this? No one should have been able to deceive Thomas. However, before them, reality said otherwise. In the midst of the chaos, a hunter-healer immediately stepped forward to treat Thomas Andre, who was lying on the ground helpless. His body was covered in terrible wounds, his bones crushed by Jinwoo's brutal attacks. Even though he was a national-ranked hunter, wounds like this were not something that could heal on their own. His body's natural regeneration would not be enough to restore his condition. He needed the help of a healer to save his life. Around them, members of the Hunter Bureau and hunters from the Scavenger Guild were also busy evacuating their injured comrades. Suddenly, a member of the Hunter Bureau came with a pale face, delivering a shocking report. "Hunter Wang Dong-soo has been found dead," he said in a trembling voice. Not only that, his heart has also stopped beating. Those words immediately shook everyone at the scene. They knew how powerful a hunter like Wang Dong-soo was. The fact that he had been found dead.
Still craving more shadows? Hit that like, subscribe, and join the next raid.